There were techniques that were, in my view, that were worse than waterboarding. Like, for example, there was the cold cell. So they strip you naked, they chain you to an eye bolt in the ceiling, so you can't lay or kneel or sit or anything. You can't get comfortable in any way. And they chill the cell to 50 degrees Fahrenheit, and then every hour somebody comes in and throws a bucket of ice water on you.
Oh.
But we killed people with that technique.
In this recent interview with Joe Rogan, John Kiriakou, a former CIA officer, reveals how the agency's post-9/11 torture program was disguised with euphemisms and quickly spiraled out of control. He describes the internal warnings that were ignored, the deadly consequences of techniques like the cold cell, and the chilling reality that people died while the Justice Department looked the other way.
I said, I don't know, man. That sounds like a torture program. And he said, it's not a torture program. We got it cleared by the Justice Department, and the president signed it. He says, think about it. I said, yeah, give me an hour. I need an hour to think about it. I walked out of the cafeteria. I went up to the 7th floor, which is the executive floor. And there was a very, very senior officer up there for whom I had worked 10 years earlier in the Middle East. I knocked on his door, no appointment or anything. And I said, hey, I need some advice. I was just asked if I wanted to be trained in these enhanced interrogation techniques. What do you think of that? And he said, first of all, let's call a spade a spade. He said, this is a torture program. They can use whatever euphemism they want, but this is a torture program, and torture is a slippery slope. He said, you know how these guys are. Somebody's going to be a cowboy. They're going to go overboard, and they're going to kill a prisoner. And when that happens, there's going to be a congressional investigation, then there's going to be a Justice Department investigation, and somebody's going to go to prison. Do you want to go to prison? I said, no, I don't want to go to prison. As it turned out, I was the only person who went to prison, but I said, no, I don't want to go to prison. I went back downstairs. I said, listen, I have a moral and ethical problem with this. I think it's illegal, and I don't want any part of it. The funny thing is, I had just captured Abu Zubaydah, who we believed was the number 3 in Al-Qaeda. And I got passed over for promotion. And the reason I got passed over, they said, was because I turned down the training. The head of the Counterterrorism Center said in my promotion panel that I had displayed a shocking lack of commitment to counterterrorism. Then the guy who had given me the advice saw that my name wasn't on the promotion list, and he promoted me out of cycle. So I realized then I was up against something that was going to be tough. And then there was a psychiatrist at the agency whom I had known for years. We are in the same men's group. We went to the same church. And he happens to be both a brigadier general in the Army and a CIA psychiatrist. And he said to me one day, buddy, you know they call you the human rights guy behind your back. And I said, yeah, I don't care. And he said, you know that's not a compliment, right? And I said, Steve, they're wrong about this, and I'm right about it. I said, I'm comfortable with the decision that I made. And I just left it at that. I didn't realize, though, how much I had pissed them off until later on. I'm almost ashamed to tell you that they asked 14 of us if we wanted to be trained in the enhanced interrogation techniques. I was the only one who said no, which is funny for a couple of reasons. Number one, there was no such thing at the time as an interrogation class, right? The FBI has deep, years-long interrogation classes. We never had to interrogate anybody. And in fact, when we started capturing prisoners in Pakistan in January of 2002, I'm like, well, what do you want me to ask him? I cabled headquarters. We caught this guy. What do you want me to ask him? Oh, you'll figure it out. Just go with it. I'm like, okay. So I was working with the Pakistani intelligence service, and I said, listen, I'm usually the good cop. Do you want to be the bad cop? And he's like, yeah, I'll be the bad cop. So we bring the prisoner out. We're sitting there looking at him. I said, what's your name? He's like, screw you. The Pakistani whacks him across the face. So I say again, what's your name? Listen, buddy, just give me your name. My friend here, he's not in a very good mood. He's not a very nice guy. Just tell me what your name is. Come on. And then they tell you their name. That day in the cafeteria, my colleague explained it in great detail. And a lot of these techniques are not torture, right? If I grab you by the lapels and say, doggone you, answer my questions, that's not torture. Or the first one was called the belly slap. or the intention slap was another way they called it, where I smack you in the belly, it makes a cracking sound. Maybe it leaves a handprint. It's a little bit embarrassing. That's not torture. But then it graduated quickly to things like waterboarding, which everybody knows about. But there were techniques that were, in my view, that were worse than waterboarding. Like, for example, there was the cold cell. So they strip you naked, they chain you to an eye bolt in the ceiling, so you can't lay or kneel or sit or anything. You can't get comfortable in any way. And they chill the cell to 50 degrees Fahrenheit, and then every hour somebody comes in and throws a bucket of ice water on you.
Oh.
But we killed people with that technique. The Justice Department never said we could kill people. And when we would kill them, at least 2 with that technique.
Kiriakou explains how, after refusing to participate in torture and later speaking out, he became the government's scapegoat. He details how the system closed ranks to protect itself, using the Espionage Act and legal threats to silence him, and how high-level officials orchestrated a campaign to destroy his career and personal life, all to keep the truth from coming out.
I'm out of the agency 3.5 years. I got a call from Brian Ross at ABC News, and he said that he had a source who said I had tortured Abu Zubaydah. I said, that was absolutely false. I was the only person who was kind to Abu Zubaydah. I said, I've never laid a hand on Abu Zubaydah or any other prisoner. And he said, well, you're welcome to come on the show and defend yourself. Well, I had never spoken to a reporter before. I didn't know that was a reporter's trick. So I said, I'll think about it. In the meantime, President Bush, I remember it being a Monday, President Bush gives a press conference. And the International Committee of the Red Cross had said in a paper that the CIA was torturing prisoners. Human Rights Watch said CIA is torturing prisoners. And Amnesty International said CIA is torturing prisoners. So a reporter says, look, all these international human rights organizations are saying that the CIA is torturing its prisoners. What's your response to that? And the president looks right in the camera and he goes, we do not torture, like that. And I said to my wife, who was a senior CIA officer, I said, he is a bald-faced liar. He's looking the American people right in the eye, and he's lying to us. And she said, are you surprised? Well, then on Wednesday, 2 days later, he gets a similar question. And he said that there is no torture. I knew he was lying. And then another 2 days later, it's Friday, and he's walking from the South Portico of the White House to the helicopter to go to Camp David for the weekend. And a reporter shouts another question about torture. And this time he stops and he turns and he says, well, if there is torture, it's because of a rogue CIA officer. And I said to my wife, Brian Ross's sources at the White House, and they're going to pin this on me. So I called Brian Ross and I said, I'll give you your interview. And I decided they're going to leave somebody out to dry to protect themselves. So I called Brian Ross. I said, I'll give you your interview. And I decided that whatever he was going to ask me, and he never told me in advance what he was going to ask me, I was just going to tell the truth. And so he met me at the ABC News studios on DeSale Street in Washington. And I said 3 things in that interview that changed the course of the rest of my life. I said that the CIA was torturing its prisoners. I said that torture was official U.S. government policy. It was not the result of any rogue officer. And I said that the policy had been personally approved by the president himself. And then, as you can imagine, within 24 hours, the CIA files what's called a crimes report against me with the FBI, saying that I had revealed classified information. The FBI then investigates me from December of 2007 to December of 2008. And then they send my attorney a letter called a declination letter, declining to prosecute. They said that they had completed their investigation, that the information was already out there because of Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and the Red Cross. But most importantly, torture is a crime, and it is illegal to classify a crime for the purpose of keeping it from the American people. so no charges. My wife and I went out to celebrate that night. We went to dinner. 3-4 weeks later, Barack Obama becomes president, and he names John Brennan, at first CIA director, but the liberals went crazy because Brennan was one of the fathers of the torture program. Everybody seems to forget that now. And we can get into that if you want. But he then names Brennan the Deputy National Security Advisor for Counterterrorism. Brennan immediately sends a memo to Eric Holder, the new Attorney General, and says, talking about me, charge him with espionage. And Holder writes back, we got these memos in discovery when I went to trial. Holder writes back and says, my people don't think he committed espionage. And then Brennan writes back and says, charge him anyway and make him defend himself. So they charged me with 5 felonies, 3 counts of espionage. They waited until I went bankrupt, and then they dropped the espionage charges. There's a book by Harvey Silverglate, who's a professor of law at Harvard University. The book is called 3 Felonies a Day. And he says that we are so over-regulated, so over-criminalized in this country that the average American on the average day going about his or her normal daily business commits 3 felonies every single day. So if they want to get you, they're going to get you. And there's nothing you can do to protect yourself.
Reflecting on the fallout, Kiriakou describes the personal cost of whistleblowing, prosecution, imprisonment, and blacklisting. He argues that the real power in Washington lies with unelected, unaccountable officials who can outlast presidents and manipulate events from behind the scenes, making transparency and independent voices more crucial than ever.